bought by the billionaire. But she owned him. Part 3. Chapter 12, Ghosts. The morning after the whisper, Lucien was gone. No note. No schedule update. No explanation. Mila had grown used to his polished disappearances, like smoke dissipating without apology, but this time, something gnawed at her. After everything that had happened in Paris, the rooftop, the almost kiss, the whispered name in the dark, this silence felt heavier. Personal. Not professional distance. Emotional retreat. She searched the suite. His phone was gone. His watch, always placed on the marble valet tray, was missing. But the concierge desk provided a clue when she casually asked if a car had been called. "Oui, mademoiselle," the staffer replied. "Monsieur Ray requested a private transfer. Destination, Cimetière du Montparnasse. A cemetery." Mila's heart stalled. She didn't question why, only who. By noon, she stood outside the iron gates of the Montparnasse cemetery, its stone angels casting long shadows across the winter grass. The sky was overcast, the clouds hanging low like grief held in suspension. Mila wore sunglasses, a grey wool coat cinched at the waist, and boots that crunched softly over the gravel paths. She walked quietly between the rows of crypts and mausoleums, careful not to draw attention. But her eyes searched constantly, for the silhouette she knew too well. Lucien stood alone. Near the center of the grounds, beside an old stone bench and a modest granite headstone. No grand mausoleum. No gold lettering. Just simplicity. And pain. He was dressed in black, no coat, no gloves, as if the cold grounded him. One hand rested in his pocket, the other held a small white rose. Mila watched as he crouched, placed the rose at the base of the grave, and brushed his fingers once over the etched name. She inched closer, hiding behind a marble pillar, her pulse thunderous in her ears. The name on the headstone came into view. Hilaire Grayson. 1996–2022. She danced through every storm. Mila's knees nearly gave out. Her sister. This was her sister's grave. Tears rose before she could stop them, but she held herself steady, biting her lip until it hurt. Lucien had been here before. Often enough that the staff at the hotel knew not to question him. He had stood here, looking at this same stone. Mourned someone he'd claimed not to know. Someone he'd let die. Why? She watched him from behind the pillar, frozen, her thoughts spiraling. He crouched again, his voice barely audible, but she caught the edges of it on the wind. "I should have done more. I should have stopped them sooner." Mila's nails dug into her palms. So he had known. Maybe not everything. Maybe not the scope. But enough. Enough to regret it. Enough to visit. To mourn. He sat down on the bench beside the grave and ran a hand through his hair. The mask of perfection finally cracked, shattered under the weight of old grief. He looked smaller somehow, not like the commanding, untouchable man who ran boardrooms and controlled billions, but like someone haunted. Mila suddenly didn't know how to feel. This was the man she had come to destroy. And yet, he was mourning her sister. What kind of monster mourned the very person he'd hurt? And why hadn't he told her he knew? Unless he didn't connect the dots. Unless he didn't know Hilaire Grayson was her sister. He hadn't said the name when he bought her at the auction. Hadn't flinched when she said it herself in passing, Mila Grayson. Maybe he'd never linked them. Maybe she was just another beautiful woman to him, another lie wrapped in silk. But she wasn't. She was Illyria's blood. She was a fuse wrapped in diamonds, waiting to explode. And now, as she watched him press 2 fingers gently to the top of the stone, like a silent apology, her fury twisted. Because this man wasn't just part of the destruction. He was part of the grief. And that made everything far more dangerous. Mila slipped away before he saw her. Back through the gates. Back into the streets of Paris where nothing was safe anymore. Not even the truth. Because the man she was supposed to ruin was grieving the sister she came to avenge. And he didn't even know she was next. Chapter 13, Cassandra Strikes Back. The headline hit the internet like a bomb at dawn. Explosion symbol exclusive. Billionaire CEO Lucien Ray buys fiancée in secret contract deal, fake love or real scandal. Mila stared at the glowing screen of her phone in bed, her pulse roaring in her ears. The article was splashed across every tabloid, every gossip blog, every whisper-fueled Instagram reel. Photos of her and Lucien, red carpets, gala smiles, the masked ball, were paired with screenshots of the contract. Not the whole thing, but enough. Enough to show that she was being paid. That their relationship had been orchestrated. That their engagement was a lie. The headlines spiraled from there. Ice King melts for money. Bought beauty, who is Mila Grayson, really? Engagement or PR fraud? And at the bottom of the first post, in a whisper of digital poison, was a familiar name. Posted anonymously, but sourced by Cassandra DeVos. Of course. Mila threw off the covers, already dialing Lucien. He answered on the second ring, voice like steel dipped in fire. I've seen it. Lucien, I didn't. I know. Don't say anything. I'm already handling it. Click. The line went dead. By the time she reached Ray International's Manhattan headquarters, it was a war zone. Paparazzi mobbed the sidewalk like piranhas. Cameras flashed from behind velvet ropes as Mila stepped out of the black SUV in a sleek black sheath dress and oversized sunglasses. Her posture was perfect. Her smile was steel. They shouted. Mila. Did you marry him for money? Is it true you were auctioned off? Are you in love with Lucien Ray or his bank account? She didn't flinch. Inside the building, Lucien stood at the top of the grand staircase, surrounded by his legal team and 3 of his senior executives. He looked like a statue carved from fury. Controlled, lethal, and not remotely surprised. The moment he saw her, he dismissed the others with a nod. Leave us. They scattered like crows. He turned to Mila, eyes unreadable. Tell me exactly what happened, he said. I didn't leak it. I know you didn't. His voice was calm, but it had the edge of thunder. But someone close to you might have. Do you have enemies? I have a long list, she said dryly. But Cassandra is at the top. She did this, Lucien said. And she's going to regret it. His hands were fisted at his sides. He rarely showed emotion in the office, but now, she saw a flicker of something that almost looked like protection. Not for himself. For her. But why would she go after me? Mila asked. I thought she hated you. She does. But she fears me. You're the one thing she thinks she can use to wound me in public. Mila looked away. Because I'm disposable. His voice dropped. Because she thinks you're weak. A toy I'll discard. And she wants the world to watch it happen. Silence pulsed between them. And then Lucien did something that stunned her. He stepped forward, closed the distance between them, and gently lifted her hand. "You're not disposable," he said quietly. "Not to me." Mila couldn't breathe. He wasn't looking at her like a CEO defending a contract. He was looking at her like a man making a choice. Hours later, the press conference aired across every major outlet. Lucien stood before the cameras in his private boardroom, Mila at his side. He spoke with cool command, every word sharpened like a blade. "Yes. I entered into a legal agreement with Miss Grayson. But what began as a strategic alliance has evolved into something more personal. Mila is not a commodity. She is not a pawn. She is the most honest presence I've had in my life in years. And no headline will change that." The press lapped it up. Some scoffed. Most believed. But the internet had already dubbed them #billionaire and bride. That night, the penthouse was silent. Mila stood at the bar in a black slip dress, pouring a drink she didn't really want. Lucien entered moments later, jacket off, tie loose, sleeves rolled. He looked more human than she'd ever seen him. "I meant what I said," he told her. "Which part?" "That you're not disposable." She turned to face him, glass still in hand. "But you're still wondering if I leaked it." "No," he said. "But I need to know everything. Every secret. Every motive. Every truth you're not telling me." Her pulse stuttered. "Why now?" "Because if we're going to survive this storm," he said, stepping close, "I need to know what's real. Not just for the press. For me." Her mouth opened, but no words came. Because the truth was nuclear. And she wasn't ready to drop it, not yet. Chapter 14, The Kiss That Broke the Ice. There were storms, and then there were silences. And Mila Grayson had always feared the second more. It had been 3 days since the press conference, and the firestorm was finally cooling. The headlines had lost their sting. The photos were replaced by newer scandals, political flare-ups, a royal divorce, a surprise celebrity affair. But inside Lucien Ray's penthouse, something else burned. Tension. Thick, electric, unspeakable. Lucien had become even more difficult to read, his silences deeper, his stares longer. He hadn't asked again about the leak, or the contract, or her secrets. But Mila could feel it every time they passed each other. The pull. The question. And something else she hadn't expected. Desire. Not performative. Not contractual. Real. That evening, the sky opened above Manhattan. Thunder cracked and rain pounded against the windows like fists demanding to be let in. Mila sat curled in a wingback chair near the fire, barefoot, legs tucked under her. A book lay forgotten in her lap. She could feel him enter the room before she saw him. Lucien. No tie, shirt sleeves rolled, hair slightly damp from his walk in the rain. He looked like a man carved out of a storm. Wild. Controlled. Dangerous. He said nothing at first. Just crossed to the bar and poured himself a glass of whiskey. His hand trembled, slightly. It was the first time she'd ever seen him shake. "Bad day?" she asked softly. He didn't answer. Instead, he took a long sip, then turned and faced her. "I don't trust you," he said. She blinked. "I know," she whispered. "I wouldn't either." That startled him. He walked to the fireplace and stared into the flames for a long moment. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "You were supposed to be simple. Manageable. Like a spreadsheet," she said, voice cracking slightly with something like heartbreak. "Exactly." She stood slowly, walked toward him, barefoot on cold marble. "I wasn't trying to complicate your life," she said. "I only wanted to survive it." Their eyes met. And in that moment, she saw it, not ice. Grief. Longing. 1,000 locked doors cracking open. So she did the one thing she hadn't planned. The one thing that had nothing to do with the contract. Or the mission. Or the revenge burning in her pocket like a loaded gun. She kissed him. Not the kind of kiss that plays well for cameras. Not the careful kind meant to manipulate or distract. This was raw. Quiet. Unscripted. Her hand slid up to his jaw, fingertips brushing the scar near his cheekbone. She tilted her face just enough to meet him halfway, eyes fluttering closed as their mouths met. At first, he didn't move. Then he inhaled sharply, like her lips had jolted him back to life, and kissed her back. His hands found her waist, then her back, then her neck. He pulled her closer until their bodies were flush, their heartbeats clashing like drumbeats. The kiss deepened. He tasted like fire and salt and something he'd buried long ago. She felt him melt. And then she felt herself shatter. Because it wasn't for revenge anymore. It wasn't part of her plan. And as his lips moved over hers like a prayer he didn't believe he deserved, Mila realized. She was falling. For the man. Not the contract. Not the power. Not the enemy. Him. When they finally pulled apart, breathless, she stepped back first. She looked at him like he was a cliff and she'd just thrown herself off it. Lucien didn't speak. He didn't smile. He just stared at her like something inside him had broken free. And Mila. She turned before he could see the tears. Because in that one kiss, she had betrayed everything she came to do. Chapter 15, The Betrayal. Lucien Ray didn't believe in coincidences. So when his security software pinged an alert about an unauthorized USB device plugged into his server weeks ago, just after the Paris trip, he didn't dismiss it. He investigated. Silently. Thoroughly. He reviewed timestamps. Footage. Network logs. All of it pointed to one person. Mila. It took him less than a day to narrow it down to a specific flash drive. Less than a minute to locate it, hidden in a false bottom compact tucked into her travel bag. Clever. Elegant. He almost admired it. Almost. Now, he stood in the center of his private study, holding the tiny silver drive like it was a live grenade. Mila stood across from him, barefoot in silk, her eyes wide but unreadable, as the weight of what she had done crashed down between them. She didn't try to run. Didn't pretend she didn't know what it was. She just said, softly, "You went through my things. You hacked my server," he countered, voice low and lethal. Mila's pulse throbbed in her neck. She'd prepared for this confrontation 100 different ways, cold lies, fake innocence, even indignant outrage. But when the moment finally arrived, none of those masks fit. So she told him the truth. Or at least, most of it. "I was looking for something," she said. "Something buried. You went into confidential company files. Because your company buried the truth." He didn't move. But the temperature in the room dropped 5 degrees. "What truth?" Mila's throat tightened. I found records about a clinical trial. Phase 3. One of your subsidiaries ran it. The data was suppressed. The patients suffered. One of them died. Lucien's eyes darkened, the pain behind them rising like a storm. You think I approved that? I think you were briefed on it. He didn't deny it. His silence was enough. Then yes, she whispered. I think you knew. Lucien took a step closer, the flash drive clenched in his fist. Why? Why were you digging? Why her? Why this file? Mila hesitated. One word, Ilera, was on the tip of her tongue. Her sister. Her reason. But if she said it now, it wouldn't feel like justice. It would feel like revenge, poisoned by emotion, fueled by a kiss that had meant too much. So instead, she said, because someone I cared about, suffered. And no one paid the price. Lucien stared at her, searching for something, maybe the last shard of trust between them. You came here under false pretenses, he said. You pretended to be something you're not. Mila nodded. So did you. That landed. He flinched. Silence filled the room like smoke, hot, thick, suffocating. And then he did something she didn't expect. He didn't throw her out. He didn't scream. Didn't call security. Didn't call his lawyers. He stepped forward again, so close she could see the storm in his eyes. And he said, voice rough. Everything about you is a lie, except your eyes. They've never lied to me. Then he kissed her. Hard. Like fury. Like grief. Like confession. His mouth claimed hers with the desperation of a man trying to rewrite a mistake in real time. His hands tangled in her hair, pulled her closer, crushed her against him like he didn't know whether to punish her or possess her. Mila didn't fight him. She kissed him back. Because for one wild, broken moment, she needed it to be real. Needed him to be real. When they broke apart, breathless, she pressed her forehead to his. I never meant for it to get this far. Lucien's voice was a whisper. It's already too far. They stood there in the silence, both of them unraveling, two enemies, two liars, two lovers caught in a war neither of them could win without losing something. Mila had confessed part of her truth. But not the one that mattered most. Not the name on the grave. Not the bond written in blood. Not that the woman he couldn't save was her sister. Not yet. Chapter 16, The Fire. The air between them didn't cool after the kiss. It ignited. There was no line anymore between performance and reality, no script to follow. Whatever was happening between them now had burned through contracts, pasts, and carefully cultivated lies. And it started with a single glance the morning after. Lucien walked into the kitchen, suit jacket slung over one shoulder, shirt half buttoned, and a faint scratch trailing down the column of his throat. Mila was already there, barefoot again, wearing one of his shirts, something she hadn't planned but hadn't stopped herself from doing. He paused. So did she. Their eyes met over the rim of her coffee cup. And suddenly, everything, every rule they had once sworn to follow, was ashes. It was the way he touched her now, not carefully, not coldly, but like a man possessed. It was the way his fingers found the back of her neck during meetings, the small of her back at public functions. The way he looked at her across boardrooms like he wanted to destroy the distance between them. It was the way he called her name in a voice that sounded nothing like the Ice King. Mila. And it was the way she responded, how her hands memorized the feel of his chest, the tension in his shoulders, the rare, quiet sighs he let slip when he let her close enough to hurt him. The fire started in his office the day after the flash drive discovery. She had walked in to say she'd scheduled his meeting with the Zurich board, and he'd pulled her in without a word, lifted her onto the edge of the desk, and kissed her like he needed her to survive. When it was over, she sat there with her lipstick smeared and her pulse sprinting, and whispered, "This wasn't part of the contract." Lucien looked her dead in the eyes and said, "Good. It was never just about sex. It was about control." And somewhere along the way, Mila lost hers. She had told herself from the start, control him. Manipulate him. Break him. But now, she was the one who couldn't stop thinking about the shape of his voice when he said her name, or the way his hand lingered on her thigh under linen tablecloths, or how he looked at her like she was the one thing in the world he hadn't already conquered. At first, she thought it was strategy, use the connection, draw him closer, pull him apart from the inside. But it stopped feeling like strategy the night he fell asleep beside her for the first time. He hadn't meant to. They weren't even supposed to be in the same bed. But a storm had knocked out the power, and the backup generators hadn't kicked in, and Mila had found herself walking toward his room with a candle and an excuse she never had to finish. He didn't ask questions. He just pulled back the covers. She didn't leave until morning. And when she woke up tangled in his arms, his heart beat strong against her cheek, she didn't want to move. Not because of the plan. Because of him. She was still lying to him. Still hiding the name of the woman buried in Montparnasse. Still carrying that flash drive like a loaded weapon in her purse. But her heart was no longer following the mission. And that terrified her. Because Lucien wasn't supposed to become human. He wasn't supposed to become hers. He was supposed to be her target. But when he traced her spine in the dark and whispered things no one else would ever hear, when he pressed his forehead to hers like she was the only thing anchoring him to this world, Mila felt something deep, molten, and dangerous ignite in her chest. Something she had never expected, love. Late one night, she stood alone on the balcony, the city glittering beneath her like temptation. She still had the truth. Still had the power to ruin him. But her hand trembled when she held the flash drive now. Because if she destroyed him, she wasn't sure she'd survive it either. She thought she was in control. But now, she was the one being owned. By her own heart. By a man she had come to destroy. By a fire that wasn't supposed to feel this real. Chapter 17, The Letter. The past has a way of surfacing when you least expect it, quiet, uninvited, and armed. For Mila, it arrived in the form of a box. She found it on a grey Wednesday afternoon, tucked behind old photo albums in the attic of her mother's brownstone. She hadn't planned on staying long, just a quick stop to check in, deliver groceries, smile, lie, but the rain had kept her inside, and nostalgia had lured her up the creaky stairs. The box was labeled in Ilera's handwriting. Sharp, looping cursive. Black marker on faded cardboard. Mila, for after. Her breath caught. Her hands trembled as she peeled the flaps back. Inside, a worn copy of The Little Prince, a cracked iPod loaded with ballet scores, a Polaroid of the two of them laughing on Coney Island, and at the bottom, wrapped in a faded scarf from Ilera's treatment days. A letter. Yellowed. Folded twice. Sealed with tape. She stared at her name written across the front. Her full name. Mila Elise Grayson. 1,000 warnings screamed in her head. She ignored them. She sat on the attic floor and opened it. Mila. If you're reading this, I probably didn't make it. Or maybe I did and you're just snooping, in which case, hi, you little gremlin. But if I'm gone, then you're probably angry. Good. Be angry. Be furious. At the system. At the silence. At what was done to people like me, over and over, until we became numbers in medical files. But don't lose yourself in revenge. And Mila, don't destroy him. I know you. You're probably already plotting. You're always the storm I never could be. But listen to me, Lucian Ray didn't kill me. He tried to help me. More than once. He pushed his team to extend treatment when the board said it was a waste of funding. He fought to keep me in the program when my numbers tanked. He visited me, twice. Once when no one else from the company even knew my name. He remembered it. He brought me books. He didn't have to. He looked me in the eye when I was bald, broken, and barely breathing, and he said, I'm sorry we failed you. He meant it. So if you've gotten close to him, close enough to hate him, look again. He's not your enemy, Mila. Sometimes, the system breaks good people too. I love you. Always. Even when you're wrong. Illyria. Mila stared at the page, the words smearing as tears blurred her vision. She read it again. And again. Each line cracked her open a little more. Don't destroy him. He saved me more than once. How could that be possible? She had imagined Lucian in so many ways, as a monster in a tailored suit, a cold-blooded architect of her sister's downfall, a king with blood on his hands and silence in his eyes. But she had never imagined this. A man who sat at Illyria's bedside. A man who fought for her behind closed doors. A man who remembered her name when no one else did. She thought back to the night she found him at the grave in Paris. The way he placed the rose. The way he whispered, I should have done more. He hadn't known who Mila was. He hadn't known she was Illyria's sister. And still. He grieved. The drive in her purse suddenly felt heavier. Tainted. Her entire plan, months of lies, manipulation, stolen files, proximity for revenge, it all cracked at the center. Because Illyria hadn't wanted revenge. And maybe Lucian wasn't the villain. Maybe he was the one person in the machine who had tried, truly tried, to fight it. The memory of his hands on her waist, the softness in his voice when he said her name in his sleep, it wasn't strategic. It was real. She had fallen in love with the man her sister wanted to forgive. And now, Mila wasn't sure if she was fighting the enemy anymore. Or fighting herself. Chapter 18, The Proposal. Mila Grayson had stood under countless chandeliers since this all began. But never like this. There were no diamonds overhead. No cameras. No stylists. No curated press packages or choreographed flashbulbs. Just an overcast New York sky, the rooftop garden of the Ray International Tower, and the faint scent of roses blooming out of season. And Lucian. Standing in front of her. Alone. Ring in hand. Not like a CEO. Not like a man with control. But like someone giving it up. The day had begun like any other, until it didn't. Lucian had been distant for the last few hours. Not cold, not angry, just quiet. Mila had assumed it was work. Or maybe it was the pressure of the engagement ball looming, the endless logistics of their public love story. But something felt different. He'd called her to the rooftop just before sunset. Told her to wear something warm. Nothing formal. When she arrived, he was already there. In a simple wool coat, no entourage, no ring of assistants or flashing phones. Just him. The skyline sprawled behind him like a silent witness. His eyes, usually hard as flint, were softer now. Guarded, yes, but open. Mila, he said, stepping toward her. She tilted her head. You're not usually a fan of fresh air. I'm not usually a fan of losing control, he said. But here we are. He took a breath. And then, without preamble, he knelt. Her heart stopped. Mila Grayson, he said, voice low and steady, I know how this started. I know it was business. I know I set rules, boundaries, and walls so high even I couldn't see past them. But you climbed over every single one. He opened the box. A ring of brushed platinum, no stone. Elegant. Understated. Real. I've lived my whole life calculating risk, he said. But you're the one thing I never factored in. The one variable I can't control. She tried to speak. She couldn't. This isn't a performance. Not for the board. Not for the press. Not for anyone but us. He looked up at her. Something broke in his voice. No contracts. No press release. Just me. Asking you to choose this. Choose me. Mila's hands were shaking. The letter from Ilera burned in her coat pocket. The flash drive in her purse weighed more than steel. The truth she'd buried between her ribs had started to bleed through her bones. He didn't know. Still didn't know. Who she was. Why she came. He thought he was proposing to the woman he loved. He didn't know he was kneeling in front of his enemy. And still, he knelt. Still, he looked up at her like she was the only thing keeping him grounded. Mila's throat tightened. The words came without planning. Yes. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a fairy tale shriek. Just a whisper. But Lucien smiled. For real. Like he didn't have to hide anymore. Like this wasn't just the end of a performance, it was the start of something dangerous and human and true. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He stood and kissed her, not hungrily, not like he had something to prove, but gently. Reverently. Like she was a choice he'd never regret. Mila kissed him back. Because she meant it. And because she didn't. That night, she stood in the penthouse bathroom, alone, staring at her reflection. The ring caught the light. So did her eyes, wet, red-rimmed, and furious. Not at him. At herself. She opened the drawer, pulled out the flash drive. The data was all there. The emails. The files. The cover-up. The proof that Lucien Ray had once been silent when it mattered most. She could still expose him. She should. Because justice didn't care about whispered names or late-night kisses. It didn't care that Ilera had once asked for mercy. Or that Lucien had brought her books and remembered her name. Or that now, Mila's own name trembled on his lips like a prayer. She had said yes. But somewhere deep down, beneath the silk and champagne and the weight of his ring, she still planned to burn him. Because every broken heart deserves a comeback. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more emotional romance every week. Hit like, drop a comment, and ring the bell so you never miss a moment of betrayal, redemption, and powerful love. And don't keep the drama to yourself, share this story with someone who lives for twists just like you. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is becoming unforgettable.